So at CCI, I wear many hats, both as biocurators and also work with text miners to try to come up with tools that are useful for biocuration. The pictures here are just from last week from my vacation in Costa Rica, so my brain might not be all here, but hopefully I made it. So this is an outline of the talk. Basically, I will give you an overview of the BioCreative. I will talk about the text mining needs in biocuration, the previous work, and also what BioCreative has done. I'll talk about the BioCreative GO Task, gene ontology task, the BioCreative user interactive task, and the Sinomine at BioCreative. So we are going to conclude with what Sinomine and BioCreative have in common and their involvement. So BioCreative, so sorry, there's something wrong. I checked this, okay. Ignore the bottom part. So BioCreative is an internationally community-wide effort. The idea is evaluating text mining tools for the biomedical domain. And these are all the different organizations here are the ones that has been the core for organizing the different BioCreative. But there have been many, many other organizations who have been involved, like MGI, TARE, Wormbase, and so on, that I will acknowledge later. It is a collaborative and interdisciplinary effort. And the idea is to bring together the different communities, the text mining, the biocuration, publishing houses, and also bioinformatics. And it has focused on the different tracks have been driven by the needs of the user and focus on biocuration tasks, biocuration workflows, and interoperability. So the idea, this is aligned with what Gali said before about having a bridge between the NLP and biocuration bioinformatics paradigms here. So that's our idea is to bridge that gap. So this is a website for the BioCreative. If you want to know about, we have an upcoming workshop in October in Washington, DC at NIH. And here are some of the different, this is an outline of the different biocreatives that happened, started in 2004. 3 of them happened in Spain, and they have different tasks that they tackle. It started with gene mention, gene normalization, gene ontology, it was the task, some of the tasks were repeated, but in 2010, all of the previous tasks were batch tasks or shared tasks. Basically, you provide a task, you provide the corpus, and then the teams provide the results. In 2010, we introduced an interactive task. So again, in line with the view here, we are not interested only in systems that tackles individual problems, so we want to see how they can be presented to curators so they can actually use it for curation. Last one was in 2012, and next one will be in October. And here in red are the ones that really have biocurators involved in the different tasks. So the idea of BioCreative is to design basically we design the tracks based on user needs. And I know it has been frustrated for some of the biocurators involved, of some of the groups, especially at the beginning, because the involvement of the biocurator was at the preparation of the corpus, but not at anything, as it was said before, not at getting something from it later to be useful for them. But now we're trying to change that. Also, we add complexity to those tasks that are repeated. For example, for gene normalization, the very first time, as I mentioned to Max before, is they were basically scoped to a specific species. So it was easier. We have a nice performance on that task. But later, it was was made more complex to any species and full text. We analyze biocuration workflow. So in order to know what is important to biocurators, we need to know how they do curation, literature curation. We also try to adopt community standards. For example, gene ontology for functional annotation, molecular interaction ontology for protein-protein interaction, and so on. And we tried to explore the use of text mining interfaces by Biocurator. And the idea here is we want to see how they effectively can be used for biocuration. So the previous work is the same work that Gali was referring at the beginning. And actually, Gali was involved, Kevin was involved, I was involved in that as well. And basically was studying the workflow of different biocuration groups and also submitting a survey to the biocuration community, asking different bottlenecks in their workflows, their curation priorities, and the possible points in which they see the text mining workflow could fit. So the conclusions for that is majority of the groups use, at some point, use a text mining system, try some text mining system. But the obstacle for adopting or implementing was the prevalence of abstract-only text mining tools, the low performance of some of the systems, and also that the tool really must be integrated into the workflow. So we have all these different tools that are meant for different purposes here. And basically, the users don't know about all of these, are not exposed to them, and are not basically providing the user their final goal of biocuration. So the critique in this work to for example, to the biocuration or challenges similar to biocuration is that all the evaluations were focusing on isolated text mining tasks, and they haven't put the human in the loop. So we extended in BioCreative 2012, in track 2, we focused on literature-based curation. So we extended this study and invited different groups to submit the curation workflow again. But we asked more detailed information. And we have all these different groups that submitted the description. And what we have found in common is that one of the things that they complain about is that, or they need, let's say, is a curator-friendly interface. Also, they want those that are already using text mining tools, 100% of them were using some text mining tool, but basically they were using very basic functions. And also, their major needs was in document triage and assisting with Go annotation. And in this case, it's because 7 of the 8 are mods, are model organism database. So, and many of them have already used Expresso in some sort. So in response to the first one, for example, for the user-friendly interface is a must, BioCreative introduced a user-interacted task, which puts the human in the loop. And the second one, in response to the Go annotation, we provided the Go task. What happened here? Sorry. So ignore the last part. So the Go task, I'm going to start with that one because it's still a batch task, is to help automatic identification of Go concepts from full text articles. And in this case, the motivation here is that Go annotation is a biocuration bottleneck, and that has been expressed by many of the database. It also has limited success on automatic Go prediction because there is no, first, the inference of Go terms is a very difficult task, and also there is not a good gold standard set. So we decided to provide an exhaustive Go evidence passages, a corpus which annotation that includes exhaustive annotation of the sentences that are used to infer a Go term. These are we created a corpus of 200 articles, or we are about to, because I think we are like 190 something, where we annotate all these things in product, the Go term, the evidence codes, and all the evidence sentences for that term. And these are the databases that are participating in the annotation. So in terms of the different activities by BioCreative, the traditional one is a shared task where the involvement of the curator is at the very beginning by providing the manually annotated set. And this set is used to train a text mining system, and later another set is submitted for testing. And usually what we do is we measure some performance, precision, recall, other factors, and we compare the documents annotated in the gold standard versus the system. In the interactive task that we introduced, what we are doing is a little bit different. So we have a set of documents that we use a system and a curator that use that system to do the annotation. In parallel, we ask the curator to manually annotate, or at least non-text mining assisted annotation of another set. And then we compare the precision of that annotation, the time they spend manually versus using the system, and they fill up a questionnaire. So the goal of the interactive task is to explore the approaches and standards and functionalities that are used by state-of-the-art text mining systems, and basically see if they can be used for biocuration. So we already have 3 runs and 1 workshop, and these are the different, I'm not going to explain this simply, that we have been different teams that have participated, text mining teams, and we are recruiting currently biocurators for the next round. The IoT task or interactive task is a demonstration interactive task. Basically, there is not a competition. We want the systems to show the curators. Curators sit down with the system and evaluate it, and we provide feedback to the developers so they can improve to bring this gap of this communication. But for that, we need to involve users, right? So we created a user advisory group, which is a diverse sample of end users that had different needs. And these are the different organizations that are part of the UAG. So here we have Judy and we have Donghui, who are part of the UAG. And the role of the UAG is to help to develop the user requirements for the interactive task, to serve as end users in cases that are needed, to assist in some corporate annotation, and also to help in recruiting biocurators to test the systems. So what are the tasks when we said interactive tasks, but what task? So in our first try, we didn't know, we wanted to have to move one variable at a time. So we decided to keep it as a shared task in a way that say, we want systems that tackle the specific problems that we propose. In this case, it's gene normalization in full text articles, and also providing some ranking of the relevance of that gene in the paper. And we had 6 systems that participated, but as I mentioned before, we have some issues when we extended the normalization task to any species, and that issue was reflected here as well. So there was a species coverage problems in some of the tools. And another thing that was a problem was a concept of relevancy. When we said that this gene is important in the context of biology of the article, there was some disconnection of the interpretation of the team that participated and the curators. So next time, we decided to do a free selection of biocuration tasks. So basically, we said it's open. Anyone who has a tool that tackles a biocuration problem, you can present your system, and we will recruit biocurators to look at that system. So we have six teams that participated in the evaluation, and they cover, as you can see, very, very different aspects of biocuration, from protein-protein interaction to gene mention, to curation of entities in phylogenetics. So it was very, very diverse, and also very complex, because we have to deal with a lot of different curation issues. In BioCreative IV, which is the upcoming one, we have 9 that have signed up. And again, it's a free task, and you can see again that we have a variety of systems that do different things. And one of them is Sinomine here. Okay, so Sinomine has signed up for the interactive task. So when we invite the systems to participate, one of the things we do is to try to come up with the requirements for systems to provide that are available in their systems. And one of them is that they provide some baseline evaluation. We want, especially for things that have to do with gene normalization or information extraction, we want them to provide some minimal baseline metrics. So we have an idea how good the system is performing. And we also ask that these are web-based systems and are compatible with commonly used browsers. So the user advisory group, we did some exercises looking at different tools. We come up with certain functionalities that we want the systems to have. For example, highlighting in the case of the entities or relations that are discovered, we want to highlight those in the paper, in the article. And we also want the ability to edit, to be able to modify. And that was Kevin was saying, we have to provide a way out, basically. They need to be able to either delete an annotation or modify an annotation or add missing things. The other thing we requested some standard inputs and output formats. And we highly recommended full text processing, but it was up to the specific task whether that is necessary or not. So what do we measure? So in this case, we want a system to be usable. We want it to be efficient. It has to be intuitive, and it has to be satisfying. We measure performance in terms of depending on the system, depending on the task. Usually we use some metrics like precision recall and F-measure. We also look at inter-annotator agreement. This is important because we found out that for very complex curation task, the inter-annotation agreement is very, very small. And if you see that the performance of the tool is bad, if you know that an agreement between annotators is not good, then you cannot blame the tool. The curation task itself is already very difficult. And we also try to measure the time of the manual versus system-assisted annotation. And we use some subjective measure by asking the curator to fill in a survey after they complete the task. So the user survey is based on a standard questionnaire for user interface satisfaction, and it basically covers 5 main categories: the overall reaction to the system, the system's ability to help complete the task, the design of we look at the design of the application, the learning of using the application, and the usability. And the goal is to try to find the correlation of responses to these questions within those 5 categories with the overall satisfaction to the system to see what aspects are more important. And here, in these 2 links, you can see examples of the survey. We also need to recruit biocurators. And we have done so by sending emails to the Biocuration mailing list. And we also made personal contacts to people that we know would be suitable for assessing those systems. So what is in for the Biocurator? Because one of the things that I would like to gather from people here also is how to motivate people to participate in this type of work. So one of them is that they have the opportunity to be exposed to a state-of-the-art text mining system. Another thing is that they can, in this activity, they have direct communication with developers. And they can contribute to tools that later will meet the needs of the biocuration community. And eventually, we hope they adopt the tool and potential publication in peer-reviewed journal. Okay, and the last one is basically we try to give them a set of articles that they are interested in curating. So they don't spend time curating something that is not going to benefit them. So this is what we do. This is the workflow. So basically, we discuss the tasks with developers. The users, after recruitment, get trained either via Skype. They practice examples, they look at tutorials, and they report back to the group. Then we have the evaluation, the manual set and system assisted. I say manual set, but basically it's without the text mining tool. It could be the same system with the turn off text mining. And then they go through the survey. So the things that we found by doing this, like this is going to be the third round, so in the previous 2 rounds, the thing that we found is that we have to make sure that the match between system and the real world. So the system defines a biocuration task, and they define some guideline. But those guidelines might not be what a biocurator would think. So we have to make sure that they have to speak the same language. And that's why the early interaction between the text miners and the biocurators is very important. The other is annotations at sentence versus document level. A lot of text mining tools provide evidence sentence that you have to validate, and sentence by sentence, even if the annotation is repeated 100 times, and that happened. Whereas in the real life, the biocurator look at the documents and come up with the summary of the information. So if we want to imitate help the biocurator, we're not going to ask them to validate 100 things. We should provide a summary, and they should be able to validate that. Another thing is, for the biocurators, we have to make sure that they are aware that we're not testing them, we're testing the systems. So we need to encourage the participation, but we need to distinguish between participants who are novice to the curation task versus those that are seniors, because that can make a difference. For example, in the GO task, if we recruit some students versus if we recruit an expert curator. And the documentation, it's important that they provide guidelines and tutorials with examples. We have found that these are the very critical thing, because help align the views from both sides. Okay. So one of the things that we found while doing this is that the system performance is still, at least in the examples of the systems we run this experience, is still a key aspect to biocurators. Even in the interface, we're equally beautiful and have very nice functionality. But if the performance of the system is not good for the task, then they really fail to provide any help to biocuration. And the other thing is we want to make sure that the output of the tool can be used really after. It's not just validating and that's it. We want to use that in our curation workflow. So how we can provide standard formats that can be utilized. So after this, I just want to make a note that some connections were made, actually. We were able to, TextPresso setup was able to set up the pipeline for Dictibase, which was long due for them. PubTator, which was one of the systems, is being used for NLM indexing. Tactog is currently being tested by Flybase for gene detection. The Odin system has been used in FarmJKB workflow, and now will be tested in this BioCreative for the Regulon DB. And IFIP, which is a system that extracts phosphorylation and protein-protein interaction, is being explored by MageGDB. And another PCS is being used in Phenoscape workflow. So what I'm trying to say is, even that it looks like there's a lot of trying and a lot of effort, there still are some positive and some good outcomes and possibilities of curators to be aware of what is out there for them to try. So last thing, sorry. In terms of Sinomine, I think we share the same view, right? We share the same view of bridging the NLP and biocreation community, and also that environment leads to innovation. We want to bring and see all the things out there so we can bring new ideas. And basically, Sinomine provides a framework for the triage, and BioCreative offers the venue where it can be tested and exposed to other biocurators. So we know that Sinomine does not meet our minimal requirement, but it's highly relevant because it's going to be tested for MGI, so we don't want to leave it out. And the idea here is, can Sinomine be adapted to other database triage needs? So last, I want to acknowledge all these people. The different organizing groups, the UAG members, current and past members, and all the text mining teams that have participated and biocurators. Thank you.
So any questions? I know it's been a long day, so okay. I'm very very interested in how BioCreative is kind of going forward and seeing the kind of progress that we're seeing. Now, one of the things that I think I've noticed within this workshop, as opposed to the kind of presentations that I've seen at the Biocuration conference, for example, is that we've managed to get a little bit more participation from NLP people who haven't been previously engaged in trying to do biocuration work. Now, I think this is important personally. I think this is an important kind of step to make. How do you think we can address that from within the biocreative environment as well? How would we, so we're talking about engagement of the curators and providing access from the tool builders to the curators. How about, what kind of actions do you think we need to do to build bridges between the tool builders and the NLP people?
Okay, so basically it's a lot of work, it's a lot of work to try to bring together the curators with the systems, and even the systems that they present, they are some of them, we want them to be mature, but the truth is they never mature for the biocurators. So, and it's good that the biocurators have the opportunity to be exposed to this system early on, so the systems can then be improved. In terms, you're talking about systems like yours that builds a framework, right? I think in BioCreative we are working on coming up with the idea, the interactive task idea initially was to come up with modules, biocuration modules that can be put together to work, right? To come up with some biocuration workflow. So we have to work on interoperability. There are a lot of things that have to do with interoperability. And currently in the Biocreation, there is an interoperability track. But it's a little bit different from what Sinomine is doing. But if we can come up with some track which has to do with creating frameworks that you could build your biocuration workflow based on combining different text mining tools, maybe we can do it at that level.
Okay.
We have to think about it, how to do it.
Great. Well, thanks again.